Video game difficulty is something that's integral to the core design of games. It's part of getting the most important part of a game right, gameplay. Without good gameplay, you can't have a good game, and so that makes difficulty an important thing to nail when designing a game. Without a good grip on the difficulty of your game, you could forever ruin the experience that you wanted to convey through your video game. A good example of fucking up the difficulty of your game is Halo 2. Halo CE is pretty much considered a masterpiece, and even though there are issues that have been retroactively brought up due to its age, it's still an amazing experience. Combat Evolved also set the standard for Halo's difficulty, with 4 different difficulty settings that separate how people can experience the game: easy, normal, heroic, and legendary. Easy and normal are watered down versions of the campaign, where enemies can't aim, don't notice you as much, and hurt you less. Heroic is, as the description says, the way the game is meant to be played, and legendary is a less fair and extremely challenging difficulty for those who are experienced with the game and that want a larger challenge. This larger challenge was normal for every Halo except 2. This was most likely due to the absolutely asinine level of crunch the developers were put under to get this game shipped on time, but Halo 2's legendary campaign is like taking a calm stroll through the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. This game and the enemies inside of it genuinely hate you and can shoot faster than physically possible for you to match. Not that it matters, considering you couldn't even hope to last maybe 3 to 4 shots from an enemy before you die. I'm not even going to get into detail with Jackal Sniper spawns in this section on Metropolis, just know that these motherfuckers are living in a COD montage and you're in it. What sucks is that it's not a fun kind of difficult. It's annoying, frustrating, and a chore to play through at sections. Gravemind, a mission that's already pretty long, is made even longer because your entire playstyle is forced to change. You've become so entrenched in staying behind cover and essentially taking on enemies in 1v1 scenarios as much as you can, and then the beginning of Gravemind forces you into a closed-off room with 2 brutes and next to no cover. Now, I admit, I'm not the most skilled person to ever touch Halo, but I've been playing this game since I was 5 years old. This mission takes me like an hour and 15 minutes on average on Legendary, and could probably take someone trying Legendary for the first time even longer. This is for one mission out of 13 others you have to also play through. Another example of a bad way to do difficulty is rubber banding, which is usually present in most arcade racing games. The way rubber banding works is that essentially you're this front end of a rubber band, and your opponent are the back end. As you crush your opponents and pull further and further away, the elastic of the rubber band is stretched, and so the back end snaps towards the front end, which keeps everything together. The point of this, from a game design perspective, is to make the challenge in each race consistent, while also creating closer and more exciting races for the person playing. The moment this rubber banding becomes noticeable, however, is when it completely ruins the experience. No one wants to be given a free race just because everyone else decided to throw it the last minute, and no one wants to be stuck in a race where it's extremely noticeable that the person in front of you is miraculously faster than you could ever hope to be. Once again, it creates an experience that isn't the fun kind of difficult, but instead annoying and frustrating. Now, what I mean by the fun kind of difficult is that it's actually possible to have an insanely difficult experience that's still fun. I think the perfect example of this is Dark Souls. I think people understand that this entire series of games and games similar to it are unrelentingly difficult. I don't need to get into that too much. Dark Souls is the Dark Souls of Dark Souls. You've heard the term, you get what I'm talking about. The difficulty in these games is an integral part of the experience, interwoven into the narrative. You are meant to get your shit kicked in while playing these games. That's the point. In my own experience, I suck at Souls games. I spent 3 hours playing Demon Souls on the PS5 at a friend's house, and both of us working together only managed to get to the Tower Knight, which is commonly the second boss out of 20 you'll face. I've also literally never even beat a Souls game, but the experience of trying to just jump in with absolutely zero knowledge of the world past a few YouTube lore videos blew me away with how good it is. The way the game lets you learn from your own mistakes and seeing the hints on the ground left behind by other players was some of the most fun I've had playing a video game. I'm heavily considering purchasing a PS5 just to play the Demon Souls remake. I've come to learn though that this isn't everyone's experience. Shocker. And the unrelenting torturous hellscape of Twitter taught me that a lot of people would rather have some form of easy mode or difficulty options so that more people can experience the game and lore. Some people have jobs and real actual connections outside of a computer screen and would rather spend more time focusing on that than a video game. Unfortunately, my harsh opinion on the situation situation is that I think Souls games just might not be for you. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not going to die on this hill. I don't think one way or another the world's going to stop turning if one day Souls games suddenly have difficulty sliders. I'll live, I promise. But the creator of these games has stated several times that he feels it's integral for his narrative and design experience to have every single person experience the same thing and overcome challenges through their own ingenuity. If that's what he wants for his game, then I accept it, because it's ultimately up to him how he'd like his game to be experienced. I feel like the argument for a difficulty slider in Souls games is almost like 30 years late, because have you seen some old ass games and how they handle difficulty? I mean, games in the 80s and 90s are completely different from the games we see today, but the largest difference is just how accepted it was to make almost all of these games so fucking difficult. The popular opinion is that this was done to increase the overall playtime of the game, because you can't really fit a whole lot of game onto a 1 megabyte cartridge. In some ways, I can understand the idea. If these games were a lot easier, it would be infinitely more difficult to try and charge $60, which adjusted for inflation was $125. Imagine dropping $125 on a game you beat in like 10 minutes. This means though that difficulty in these games is something you aren't actually really meant to consider. It's hard as balls, that's it. And there's no skill that will truly let you get better. It's just repetition until the ultimate strategy that you looked up in an online guide finally works. I understand that when it comes to skill ceilings, I'm probably a bit biased with my opinion. I can own it. I enjoy the idea of high skill ceilings in video games, which honestly might be its own video subject at a later date. But what I'm getting at is that I like the idea of a tough situation that can be tackled with varying levels of ease depending on how well you can use the mechanics given to you by the game. Doom Eternal is a great example of this. If you stick with the base Doom dance, as the developers like to refer to it, where you shoot at enemies, move around a bit, get ammo, switch weapons, etc., repeat, that could probably easily get you through the first 3 difficulties, pretty normally. You won't have that many issues. But Nightmare, with that skill set, will rock your shit. If you have a grasp on the mechanics though, you could make Nightmare much more viable by just learning to quick switch. That idea of a skill ceiling is what keeps me coming back to a lot of games, even multiplayer oriented ones. In CS Source, it was possible to do this. Now, balancing be damned, I will die on the hill that this should be allowed for one reason and one reason only. This is cool as fuck. Jokes aside, the real reason I think this is cool is because it takes an insane amount of skill to get anywhere near this level of good at b-hopping. Can you still b-hop in CSGO? Yeah, but it's wildly inconsistent and doesn't give nearly the same amount of benefits that b-hopping in Source did. What I'm trying to say, since I'm getting off track, is that skill ceilings are my favorite way to deal with any sort of difficulty in video games, and is the intended way to deal with the difficulty in Dark Souls. Now, before I'm done, I'd like to remind people that difficulty in video games is a hard thing to nail. It's not as simple as just making the enemies easier or harder, or making weapons do more or less damage. Game design in general is a careful balancing act of trying to figure out how to implement or change a feature without completely ruining some random other thing you've built up to this point. So if a game sometimes messes up the balancing of a certain weapon, or creates an enemy that creates sonic booms through the speed of their flick shots alone, it probably wasn't an intentional thing left in by the developers. Maybe. On that note, who the fuck intentionally decided that 22 Jackal snipers needed to be in this level? 20 fucking 2! Who signed off on that, man? They can react faster than the human eye can perceive, and I hope the person who put this Jackal sniper right here sleeps horribly tonight.